I believe that the first responsibility of school leaders is to ensure that schools best serve the needs of students. That's why we're there, students first. And within that context, student achievement becomes number one, character development number two. That's how I see the role of school principals. School principals are also make sure that they create environments where teachers can do their best work, where they have the highest form of motivation. And I think a lot has to do with how teachers are treated today. So let's begin with student achievement. A principal today must be a monomaniac when it comes to student achievement. He or she must be looking always at the data. Who are the students who are achieving? Who are those who are not achieving? And what interventions must be put in place for those who are not achieving? And at the same time, they must have an awareness of race and gender and homophobia and all of those human rights issues. That principal must be absolutely aware of those issues so that he or she is always asking questions. But what about the Aboriginal children? How are they doing? What about the poor children? What about the recent immigrants? Good principals today are human rights advocates, and they're never selective about the human beings for whom they will advocate. So that's what it is. They're active, they're in classrooms, they're seeing the quality of teaching and learning, and they're focused on results. That's it. If you are not focused on results, if, as Robert Greenleaf said in his book, Servant Leadership, at the end of your career, when people are out to celebrate you, you must be able to sit back and ask yourself, who benefited from my having that position? Were the disadvantaged any more advantaged as a result of my leadership? And they must be able to respond to that. We are there to be the advocates of the poor, advocates of the disadvantaged. That's why we have positions of responsibility. And I think any principal who is worth his or her weight in gold these days must be principals for equity. I think many of our leaders, we've spent a lot of time on the technical skills. Because there was a time when you asked, what would you like? Oh, scheduling and all of those operational stuff. I think most people have moved away from that. I think the skills of leaders today, both in business and in education, are the skills, the human resources development skills, the human relation skills, the skills that will help you to motivate people to achieve the goals of the organization. How do you motivate people? How do you sustain that motivation? How do you treat people in a way in which they feel good coming into work every day? That's the kind of leadership skills. How do you get people to do their best work? So if I were choosing principals today, yes, their qualifications are absolutely important. I would encourage them to study as much as they can, etc. But I take that for granted. It's a matter of what are their human relations and interpersonal skills are, and how can they get the best out of people. Are they self-aware? Are they genuine? Are they people of character themselves? Are they aware of their own biases and their own limitations? What is their theory of human nature? That's a fundamental question that principals must ask themselves. If we think of the literature of McGregor's theory X and theory Y and William Uchi's theory Z, let's just deal with the first two. Theory Y said that people are basically self-directed. It's a very positive view of human nature. They want to be developed, they want to do their best work, and so on. So if you believe in theory Y, that's your orientation. If you believe in theory X, it goes something like this. These are my own words. People are basically lazy. They must be prodded. They must be pushed. They're not self-directed, and so on. If you have a principal who believes in theory X, what kind of leadership are you going to expect? What kind of environment is he or she going to create? What I normally say is that that person will believe in snoopervision. Theory Xers believe in snoopervision. They don't trust people, etc. So the theory of human nature is something we need to get at. What do they believe about people, their ability to learn, their willingness to be their best selves? I would want theory Y principles in my school district. Develop them further in emotional intelligence skills. They will be able to motivate people. You will have such a high level of energy. Their teachers will want to come to school because of the culture that has been created. Fortunately, many of those theory Y principles, they're dwindling. Many boards are not hiring them anymore. They're becoming dinosaurs. The majority of principals that I've seen in Ontario, and I've been to many school districts, I think they fall within the category of theory Y principles. And people thrive under their leadership. They are co-leaders. They do not believe in power over, but they believe in power with and power through. So the way people, leaders, have a notion of power is something else we need to get at. How do they see power? And how do they use that power to the benefit of others? Those are fundamental questions that must be asked of leaders in our selection process. Because it's very often to change personalities, you know. Those qualities solidify. One writer, again Gordon Allport, talks about the authoritarian personality. Beware of the authoritarian personality in leadership. We could be training for a long time. We won't change those personalities. They believe in power over. They believe in snoopervision. But if you make the right selections now and choose the right people, then there's an upward trajectory in terms of their skills and the environments they create. I'm not saying that leaders today, that their primary goal should be to make people happy. That's not it either. If we think of the work of Thomas Sergiovanni and the levels of leadership and so on, being a humanitarian is a prerequisite. But the issue is, to what end? A humanitarian is going to create the culture to bring about organizational effectiveness and excellence in student achievement. So, to what end is our leadership? That's the big question. Qualities alone do not matter. You may say, oh, Avis, I want a charismatic principal. That has been debunked by people in the literature, like Peter Drucker. Because on the issue of charisma, he said this: there was no more charismatic leader than Hitler. He wreaked havoc on humanity with his charisma. So qualities alone do not the leader make. It's a matter of how do they use those qualities for the betterment of their organization and the human condition. And I would add, and student achievement.